Chris and Stephanie, welcome to the Chad Silveus Show.
Hey.
Hey, thanks for having us.
It's wonderful to have you. You guys are from the contemporary Christian group known as Out of the Dust, who's been making a lot of waves the past couple years. But more important than that, you guys are a married couple.
Yeah, waves is generous. More like ripples.
But you guys are pretty hopping. Like, you go on YouTube, and I'm telling you, there's a lot of views, a lot of listens, your music videos, and you've got a new album coming out, which I want to talk about that. But before we get to the heart of the music part, if anybody doesn't know your story, they have to know your story. So what is your story? Because it's special and it's unique.
Yeah. So the very short version would be that Stephanie and I met in high school. We were high school sweethearts. We got married when we were in college, and we were leading worship. Music's always been a part of our relationship, just not songwriting. That didn't come until later. But throughout college, throughout my young adulthood, I started having doubts about my faith. And even though I was very plugged in the church and very visible in the church, even, I didn't feel like that was a safe place for me to talk about doubts. And I can remember bringing up questions and, would be met with something that didn't feel encouraged or inviting of that kind of environment. So I began to isolate, and I told Stephanie. She kind of knew a little bit, but that started this divide between the two of us and between me and God, obviously. And that led me down a path of secrecy and hiding, where I got into drugs and alcohol while I was pursuing kind of a dream of the music industry, which never really amounted to anything. But through God's grace, it sounds weird to say that, but everything kind of fell apart. And I left the church and I divorced Stephanie, and that kind of took us both on this wild ride of a journey with God, where I'd sworn him off and Stephanie had to lean in more than she ever had. I ended up like the younger brother in the prodigal son story, just completely lost, completely broken and alone. All of the things that I thought were going to make me free, just enslaved me more to the sin and the struggles that I had. So I ended up on my knees crying out to God, and he met me and changed me irrevocably, just completely transformational in the way that I think of who he is and how he relates to us. And through that process where God was renewing and restoring me and my relationship with him, I started to hear a tiny whisper. It wasn't audible, but I heard a whisper that God was telling me to pursue Stephanie. So I did, and she took some convincing. She wasn't quite there yet, but yeah, through a lot of counseling and a lot of hard work on our part, we dated again. I wooed her again, and we ended up remarried a little over a year after I left.
Now, that is an amazing story on every level, not to mention what came out of it. But, just from hearing you speak, I can relate in so many ways. God changed me. He literally changed me overnight, and he made me the man that I am. I couldn't have done it on my own. And what's fascinating to me is that, we live in a world where so many couples are divorced and they stay divorced. And I don't know too many lives of people who've not been touched by divorce. My parents divorced, my wife's parents divorced, and it's become almost the norm. And to go through that, I know how hard it is, but then to come back together, it's just such a beautiful story, but it offers inspiration to any couple, that with God, anything is possible. Now, Stephanie, during this process, when your husband and you were not together, do you feel that your continuing dedication to the Lord somehow helped affect your husband in a positive way to bring him back to God?
He's nodding his head. I'm looking at him. I don't know. No, I would hope so. I know that a lot of people, when you face some sort of loss or tragedy, it can lead you to question him and his existence, or it can really encourage you to lean in because you have no other option. And that's where I was. I couldn't get through the day without him. I had built this whole life. I'd planned it out so carefully and controlled it to the way I wanted it to be. And divorce was never supposed to be a part of my story. And so when that happened, gosh, he filled in those gaps. He held me when I couldn't do it on my own. And so I just felt like God was telling me, just be Jesus in your interactions with Chris. It didn't matter what I did or what I said. I couldn't change his mind. I couldn't make him stay. I couldn't convince him that God was real, this God who had been so good to us. But if I could do anything, I could try not to be, really oppositional and angry. And of course, I felt all of those things. But the Lord, his strength alone helped me just try to have interactions with Chris when I could that showed him love.
Now, Chris, you had made reference to freedom, and I would like you, if you could real quickly, elaborate on that. You said you were, I think you mentioned in other interviews I've heard or seen of yours about, searching for freedom and it not truly being freedom.
Yeah, for sure. I think the enemy of God wants to isolate us and is really, really good at deception. Even from the earliest stories of the Bible, it's deception. That's the number one game, and it's deception and isolation. And for me, I believed that if I left the church, if I left my marriage, I'm believing these lies that if I do those things, if I run away from God and from marriage, then I'll be free. But I wanted to be free so that I could, do what I wanted to do. I wanted freedom to live life the way that I wanted to live it. And I don't know. I assume that, I have to assume that most people would end up in the ditch eventually without God. Maybe some people are better at it than I am, but I obviously was terrible at living on my own the way that I thought was best. And, freedom for me was freedom to sin, as I've said a lot, freedom to sin, which is what I wanted. I wanted the freedom to do what I wanted to do and rebel and engage in all those behavior. But freedom to sin is just slavery. And that's what I was wrapped up in.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things, the reason I wanted you elaborate more on that is because I think that's so important. It's something that I repeat often, sin is slavery. It's not freedom. And you found that out firsthand. Now I want to get to, the heart of the beautiful music now that you two make together. But I have one more question before we do that about your relationship. So amazing how you guys, were ended in divorce, but then began again and came back together. So, since you've gone through this journey together, surely you've learned a few things. What is your best advice for married couples in this day and age? Because it's hard.
Oh, man, it is. It is. And we do hear from couples frequently, those that are facing some of the same things that we faced. I think for us, the second time around, we saw, just the importance of transparency and being vulnerable, but not just that, because everybody will tell you, oh yeah, like communication's so important, and it is. But I think for Chris has talked about before, him being able to share his struggles and not be met with judgment is a huge part of it, because it's one thing to be able to be open and honest with each other. It's another to be able to take it and to support your spouse in their struggles, which is something that I wasn't good at the first time around. I was so quick to judge and have a very, black and white, right and wrong filter that God is continuing to work on with me. But Chris, what would you add? There's so many things.
The quickest things I would say would be to say you're sorry as quickly as you can. sometimes whether you think you did wrong or not, humility is a huge thing. So saying you're sorry, and then honestly just serving together. I think we get in these rhythms of, we date and we have all this fun together, and that's the culture. That's what you fall in love around, and then you get married and you're focused on your jobs, and then you have kids, and then things can just easily drift apart. But if you're serving together, or if you at least just have something in common, but serving God together and pushing the kingdom together is, I think that's like a huge staple for the health of a marriage.
I agree once again. I mean, it's great advice. I mean, you got to put God in the center of everything, and what better way to bring anything together is to have God in the center of your marriage. Now, let's talk about how this beautiful up and down story turned into the beautiful music that you two now make together and Out of the Dust. How did that exactly come together?
Well, it was not something that we ever expected, especially me. I was in education, I was teaching, and never imagined music being a part of my life. But after we got remarried, the long story short, is that we were a part of a GMA conference, did a little competition just for fun. I hated every minute of the competition aspect of it, but we ended up making it in the finals. And we were given, they said, take about 5 seconds, tell them your name, sing your song. And we felt like we needed to tell our story. And so we took about a minute right before we sang to quickly share what God had done. And as soon as we were done singing, this girl came up to me just in tears because of what she was going through with her husband. And for us, that was kind of the marker of, okay, like God has brought us through this. We know this is a story that needs to be told. And we think that music is going to be the platform that's going to let us do that. So from there, we started writing together and came in with our name and became Out of the Dust.
You came up with our name.
And is the name symbolic?
It is, yeah. It's definitely about our story. It says in Genesis that God breathed life into the dirt, into the dust in some translations. And that's what God did in our marriage. Our marriage was reduced to dust. There was no life. And yet his breath brought out something more full of life and beauty than we could have ever imagined.
Well, you guys, your music together is extremely beautiful, extremely good. And it's been extremely successful. I mean, there's so many people who are talking about it and watching your videos and listening to your music. And now you have a second album out. Why don't you talk a little bit about your new album?
Sure. It's called Now More Than Ever. And it is, I think it's just, as an artist, you always want to make something that you feel like is true. And when I say true, to me, that means it means that the lyrics are true, which you always want. You don't want false lyrics, of course, but you want something that speaks to deeper truths about reality. But also, I feel like this album is just really true to us. Like our first record had and the second one does too, but our first record was just a lot about the redemption of pain. And so there's redemption of pain and suffering. So there's a lot of, it feels a bit heavier at times. And this one, this second album, Now More Than Ever, we go there probably deeper than we did on the first record, but we just love having fun. We love pop music. We love, we love little Justin Timberlake, Shawn Mendes, and sorry, I'm showing my cards. We like fun music. So we tried to put some of that on this record to have some fun and in the course of that also explore topics that we don't feel like are maybe getting the airtime that they should.
Well, I thought it was really cool. Like you have some songs that are relatable, like to real life, because a lot of people like who shy away from artists who happen to be Christians, or they call it Christian music or they don't. But whether you're a Christian in a band or a band that's Christian or however you want to view it, a lot of people will hear that Christian term or the content of it and shy away and thinking that, it's just going to be stale and it's just going to be the same words repeated over and over and again to a different tune. But your guys' music's not like that. Like there's relatable stories and fun things And it just like a person like my age, I'm, married, have a couple kids, and I can just totally relate to like, what you're saying just by some of the lyrics that you're singing. So I think it appeals to a wide audience, not just people necessarily who are looking for praise or worship music to listen to, but people who just, want to hear good music that they can relate to.
That's very kind. Yeah, for sure.
Now, I do a segment on my show that I want to get to. Speaking of which, because we're talking about family here, and I've got a beautiful little 9-year-old daughter named Violet. Blonde hair, blue eyes. She's the sweetest little thing. I homeschool her. She's awesome. She likes to ask a question to all my guests, and I call my segment One Question with Violet. Are you guys good with that?
I love it.
Let's do it.
Let me go out of the studio and grab her. I'll be right back. Okay, I've got my beautiful daughter here with me. Her name is Violet, and here is One Question with Violet.
What do your kids do when they're on tour with you?
Oh, what a good question, Violet.
Oh, yeah. So we have a 6-year-old named Asher and a 4-year-old named Nora, and they do come with us the majority of our travel dates, and especially in the summer. And I'll say this, when we're doing what we're doing, it is work, it's ministry, and it's fun, but it's work. And our son will always say, well, we get to go on vacation, but our parents have to work. So we have a lot of downtime during the days. And so, just a few weeks ago, we went to a pumpkin patch. We find, discovery centers and children's museums. And for near water, that's always something we try to do, go to a beach.
I set up the Nintendo in our car so they can play Nintendo while we're driving.
An old, what was it, GameCube? So we make it as fun and as adventurous as we can when we're stuck in the car for a lot of hours.
Well, you're talking to a family who's a big fan of not only Nintendo, but the GameCube in particular. Oh, the amount of time I spent with my son on the GameCube.
Oh, really?
I could have something more constructive. Anyway, no, she when I told her about this interview and she started asking if you guys had kids, and I told them how you guys go on tour together, and she knew right away what she wanted to ask. She's so interested, and she asked me how old your kids were. I'm like, I don't know. I've not met them, but no, families, have so much in common. We're so similar yet different all at the same time. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to ask you a couple more questions related to your career, but I also want to talk to you about your opinion on other people's careers, because I'm a big fan of music. I have no musical talent. I don't make music. I don't sing, but I love listening to music, all sorts of music. And I can tell, most musicians are fans of music, obviously. I can tell just by talking to you guys are fans of different types of music. But first of all, you worked with Plum on your new album. What was that like? Oh,
man, she is just the sweetest. We got to meet her last year. We both we were artists on the Family Life Love Like You Mean It cruise, and got to meet her, and her husband Jeremy was there, and we got to hear her story. And she has a really similar marriage redemption story. And so when it came time to record this record, and there's a song on there called Take This, and that song, it's the most personal song I think that we've ever written. It's from my perspective of right the moment that Chris left. And as we were finishing up and kind of thinking, well, is there anybody we want to include on the record? And she came up, and I wasn't sure at first how I felt about somebody singing on something that was so personal, but the more we thought about it, the more it made so much sense to have. For one, she has an incredible voice, so that was a no-brainer. But just the idea that this song, telling the story of somebody going through what I went through, having another voice, another woman on it, just gave it this other layer of, you're not alone. When you're going through these times when you don't know what to do and all you're doing is crying out for God to take it, knowing that there's somebody else who has been through it, who has made it to the other side, and seeing God's faithfulness in it is powerful.
This is something that's kind of topical. Being fans of music, I don't know. Have you heard Kanye West's new gospel album? That's what it's called. And if so, what do you think?
Every hour, every minute. That's a yes.
Yeah. I think people are going pretty crazy about it. I hope for his sake that it's real. I think that it's really, really powerful, to see people who are prominent, come into Jesus. I think that is just, I think the world needs that. Like, there's so many attacks. So to see people like, even Justin Bieber and now Kanye, like these high profile people, I love it. And I have listened, and I think it's a pretty good record.
It's definitely creative. After I got done listening to the album, I had the word Jesus in my mind and Chick-fil-A because I heard those words a lot.
You're my number one with lemonade.
So, anyway, I had to ask you that because, you're in the biz. I just didn't know what you thought about it. So that's great. But I think it's great that anybody that puts Jesus in the forefront, that's obviously a great thing. It's a billboard for God, and we need more of that in this day and age. What about your favorite artists? Like, do you guys each have a favorite band or favorite artist that you love to listen to?
There's one.
If we had to separate it into like Christian, non-Christian, or Christian and mainstream, like I don't know. You have a better memory than I do. Like off the top.
Well, I will say, who is the one artist that's like been your biggest influence?
I mean, forever and always, it's it's John Mayer. Is like I'll never. I don't know that I'll ever love another artist as much as I love his songwriting and guitar playing, and he's just my life changed because my musical life changed because of him.
What about you, Stephanie?
One of my favorites probably the last couple of years because they are just so much fun. It's another duo named Johnny Swim. And they just seem, we've never met them, but they just seem like this beautiful picture of marriage in the secular world. They are believers, but kind of like what you're saying, they don't do the, quote unquote Christian music thing.
It's kind of like Dave Barnes. If you know Dave, like I heard Dave say one time, like if you're a Christian, then everything that you do is Christian. So if you sing a song that's not about God, it's still a Christian song because you're writing that song from the perspective of being a Christian. So I think they kind of bring that flavor to it too.
Yeah. So they're probably the ones I go to the most when I'm like, what do I want to listen to? I'm always going to feel good after I listen to a Johnny Swim record.
Well, I'll join the party. I'll tell you mine if you want to hear it. I can't.
Absolutely.
I can't just narrow it down to one, so I've narrowed it down to two. But lifelong, my two favorite bands are the Beatles and Stryper.
And Stryper, wow, that's pretty. I mean, if you like all kinds of stuff in between there, then that's a pretty big breadth of
I do. I love all types of music, but I know it's so weird. Like my two favorite bands. They're so different, but yet they're my two favorite bands. I love them both so much. So, all right. Well, speaking of music, will you guys perform some of your music? I'd love to hear it.
Absolutely.
Sure. What do you want to do?
I Come Alive?
Sure.
Okay. This is called I Come Alive. It's about how it is incredibly hard to follow Jesus because he calls us to lay down our lives for him. But with the beauty of that is that when we lay down our lives, we are, through the Spirit of God, through the helper of the Holy Spirit, we're raised to new life that's completely different. So this is I Come Alive.
I was a sinner, lost and forgotten, didn't know how far I'd fallen. Then Jesus found me, wrapped in my failure, gave me new hope. I have a Savior. I hear his call to follow, but I must die to come alive, to come alive.
Yeah.
Faith takes hold when I finally let go. When I lose myself, I find I come alive. Take every blessing, count it as loss. Lay down my life, take up its cross. Sharing his suffering, die in his death. Wake to his life, live in his fullness. Small is the gate, narrow the path that we enter by. To come alive, come alive. Faith takes hold when I finally let go. When I lose myself, I find I come alive. His calling bids me come and die. His spirit raises me to life. His calling bids me come and die. His spirit raises me to life. His calling bids me come and die. His spirit raises me to life. His calling bids me come and die. His spirit raises me to come alive, to come alive. Faith takes hold when I finally let go. When I lose myself, I find I come alive.
As a sinner lost and forgotten, didn't know how far I'd fallen. Jesus found me wrapped in my failure, gave me new hope. I have a Savior.
That was beautiful. You know, that you said you were in education, Stephanie? Yeah, that's pretty good for a teacher. Tell me you taught music class.
Amen.
I did not. I mean, I have my graduate degree in curriculum and instruction.
Really? My wife's a curriculum director as we speak.
Yeah.
So we,
all right.
Craziest thing is that Stephanie wasn't really a big out in front singer before we got divorced. And that was just one of the really cool parts of our story that God redeemed. Like while we were apart, she learned how to play the guitar, even though she had me living with her. Pretty
incredible guitarist right in my house.
Yeah, we sort of butted heads. I'm not a very good teacher. But anyway, she learned how to play the guitars. God gave her this voice, and she kind of discovered and rediscovered and reinvented. And
well, you guys sound great, and you sound great together. And God is making something beautiful, obviously, out of your marriage and your story. He's making something beautiful out of your music. It's going to touch a lot of people. It's touched me. And I sent one of your links to your video. I have a friend I was talking to today who was struggling, and I sent him one of your links to one of your videos to encourage him. You guys are just, doing amazing things for God, and I'm so happy to have you on my show. I do want to ask you about where people can buy your new album, where people can see you on tour, or if you're on tour now or it's coming up, and what websites they can go to find more about your music and hear your music.
The easiest place would just be to go to our website, outofthedustmusic.com. You can get to, the links if you're old school, want to buy physical copies and things, we've got them there. You can also buy or stream digitally, basically anywhere that you do digital music. And we're also really active on social media. So we get all those messages. We respond ourselves. So we love for people to reach out there too, Facebook and Instagram.
Out of the Dust Music. Everywhere.
Now, tours coming up. Any tours?
We are just finishing out the last few dates of the year over the next 2 weekends. And then we'll be up and going in the spring. And we do a big summer tour every year. And we do it a little unconventionally. We do our booking ourselves. And early spring, we send out a big call for anybody who wants to host us and their church, their events, conferences, even house shows. So if you're interested at all, just follow us on social media. And
I'm pastoring a church, so we need to talk after this interview about possibilities.
Hey, let's do it.
And also, I just want to thank you guys. Chris, Stephanie, thank you for coming on my show and sharing your story and sharing your music. It's so great talking to you, and I hope to have you back on my show again in the future.
Same. This was a lot of fun, Chad. Thank you.